David Jorge, an executive at Hartman Industries, smirked and told the room, "This is Esther. She's just here to help with service tonight." While she stood there swallowing the shame, his colleagues laughed. Wine glasses clinked. Then the CEO walked in, locked eyes with her, and said one sentence that froze David's blood, because the woman he just humiliated was about to be introduced as someone else entirely, and his whole life was about to shatter in front of everyone. Welcome, viewers. Here's another story of what happens when you sacrifice the wrong person for success. But before we dive and leave a like and hit the subscribe button, it's the fuel that keeps the storytelling engine running. And also, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Let's dive right in. David Jorge watched his wife arrange canapes on a silver tray, and something ugly twisted in his chest. Tonight was supposed to be his night, the board dinner that would cement his position among the company's elite. But Esther, with her simple elegance and that damned serene smile, reminded everyone exactly where he'd come from. Small apartment, modest upbringing, nothing like the wealthy background he'd been selling to his colleagues for the past 2 years. "You look beautiful," he said, the words tasting like ash. Esther glanced up, pearl earrings catching the light. "Thank you. I'm excited to finally meet everyone you work with." Excited. She was excited. David's jaw clenched. While he'd been carefully constructing his persona at Hartman Industries, dropping hints about his family's real estate portfolio, his prep school days, his summer home in the Hamptons, Esther had been working her regular job at the nonprofit, shopping at discount stores, completely oblivious to the image he needed to project. The doorbell chimed. Guests were arriving. "Listen," David said quickly, grabbing her wrist. "About tonight. I need you to do something for me." Her brow furrowed. "Of course. What is it?" "The board members, they're very particular about appearances." His mind raced, assembling the lie. "I told them we hired help for the evening. It would be better if you presented yourself that way." Silence stretched between them. Outside, car doors slammed. Voices drifted through the windows. "You want me to pretend I'm the maid?" Esther's voice was barely above a whisper. "Just for tonight, please." David squeezed her hand, desperation bleeding into his tone. "There's a promotion coming up. VP of Operations. This dinner is essentially my interview. These people, they expect a certain lifestyle, and we can't afford for them to think that you married someone beneath you." The words hung in the air like smoke. David wanted to deny it, wanted to say something that would make this okay, but his mouth had gone dry. Another doorbell ring shattered the moment. "I'll do it," Esther said finally, her voice strange. "Hollow. For you." Relief flooded through him, quickly followed by something that might have been shame if he'd let himself feel it. "Thank you. I promise, after I get this promotion, things will be different." But Esther had already turned away, smoothing her dress, her face a mask he couldn't read. The dinner began exactly as David had envisioned. Chandelier light sparkled off crystal glasses. 12 board members filled his carefully arranged dining room, their suits worth more than most people's monthly rent. David moved through the crowd like a conductor, orchestrating conversations, dropping carefully rehearsed anecdotes about his fictional privileged childhood. "My family's been in commercial real estate for 3 generations, he told Marcus Chin, the CFO, accepting a glass of scotch that cost more than he wanted to think about. "Father always said the key to success was understanding that business is about relationships, not transactions." Marcus nodded approvingly. David's chest swelled. This was working. Everything was falling into place. Then Richard Pemberton, the senior VP of Finance, gestured toward Esther as she refilled champagne glasses. "Excellent help you've got there, Jorge. Hard to find good staff these days." "Oh yes." David barely glanced at his wife. Very reliable. She came highly recommended. Esther's hand trembled slightly as she poured. The champagne bubbled gold into crystal. Not a drop spilled. Darling, could you bring out more of those crab puffs? David added, his tone deliberately dismissive. The guests are enjoying them. Of course, sir. Esther's voice was professionally neutral. She disappeared into the kitchen. The evening rolled forward. David found himself embellishing more, the lies growing bolder with each glass of scotch. Yes, he'd summered in the Hamptons. No, his yacht wasn't large, just a modest 40-footer. His prep school days at Exeter had been formative. His mother's charity galas had taught him the importance of giving back. Jennifer Walsh, director of strategic planning, leaned in. You know, David, you're exactly what Hartman Industries needs in leadership. Someone who understands our clientele, because he comes from that world. I appreciate that, Jennifer. David's smile felt like it might crack his face. I've always believed that understanding the top tier of society is crucial for serving them effectively. Across the room, Esther collected empty plates. Their eyes met for just a second. Something in her expression made his stomach turn, but he pushed the feeling away. She'd understand eventually. This sacrifice was for both of them. Once he had the VP position, the salary increase would change everything. She could quit her nonprofit job. They could actually afford the lifestyle he'd been pretending to have. The rationalization tasted sour, but David swallowed it down with his scotch. Excuse me, Esther said quietly, approaching their small group. The main course is ready. Should I begin serving? Please do, David said without looking at her. And make sure the Bordeaux is properly decanted. Not like last time. There had been no last time. They'd never employed staff. But the lie came so easily now, smooth as silk. Marcus checked his watch. Speaking of which, when is Mr. Hartman arriving? I thought he was joining us tonight. David's carefully constructed confidence wavered. Mr. Hartman is coming? Didn't anyone tell you? Jennifer looked surprised. He specifically requested an invitation. Said he wanted to personally evaluate candidates for the VP position. The room suddenly felt too hot. James Hartman, the billionaire CEO and founder of Hartman Industries, was coming to his home. The man was notoriously private, rarely attending company events. David had never even met him in person. All his interactions had been through layers of management. Of course. I was told he might stop by. Another lie, but what choice did he have? Should be here any minute, Richard added. I hear he's very particular about the character of his executives. Wants people with integrity in leadership positions. Integrity. The word echoed in David's head as Esther moved silently through the room, serving their guests her wedding ring, the one he'd saved 3 months to buy, catching the light as she worked. What had he done? The doorbell rang. Every conversation stopped. Crystal clinked softly as someone set down a glass. David's heart hammered against his ribs as he moved toward the entrance, straightening his tie, forcing his face into an expression of calm confidence he absolutely didn't feel. Opening the door, he found himself face to face with James Hartman. The man was smaller than David expected. Late 60s, silver hair, sharp blue eyes that seemed to catalog everything in a single glance. His suit was understated but clearly bespoke. Power radiated from him like heat. Mr. Hartman. David extended his hand. What an honor to have you in my home. Hartman's handshake was firm, brief. Jorge, I've heard interesting things about your work. Those blue eyes swept past David, scanning the room beyond. I appreciate the invitation. You invited yourself, David thought, but didn't say. Please come in. Everyone's eager to meet you. They entered the dining room. Board members straightened, suddenly alert. David opened his mouth to make introductions, But Hartman had stopped dead in his tracks. His gaze had locked onto Esther. She stood near the kitchen doorway, a serving tray balanced in her hands. For a moment, nobody moved. Then something extraordinary happened. James Hartman's stern expression cracked into a genuine smile. "Esther," he said warmly. David's brain stuttered. "What?" "James." Esther set down the tray, carefully. "It's good to see you." Hartman crossed the room in quick strides and pulled her into a hug. An actual hug. The billionaire CEO was embracing David's wife. No, the help, the maid, the woman he'd just spent 2 hours humiliating in front of his colleagues. "How long has it been?" Hartman asked, holding her at arm's length. 6 months? 7. 8, Esther said. Her voice had changed. The professional neutrality had vanished, replaced by something confident, assured. "You look well." "Better now." Hartman turned to the room, his arms still around Esther's shoulders. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. I wanted to arrive with our actual host, but it seems she beat me here." The silence that followed was so complete David could hear his own pulse. "I'm sorry." Jennifer Walsh's voice was faint. "Host." "Esther Hartman." The CEO's smile widened. "My daughter. And the woman who owns 51% of Hartman Industries." The room tilted. David grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. No, this wasn't possible. Esther worked at a nonprofit. She shopped at Target. She'd grown up in a modest neighborhood with parents who were teachers. He'd met them. They drove a 15-year-old Honda. "There must be some mistake," David heard himself say. "Esther is my wife. She's your wife." Hartman's expression shifted, warmth draining away. "That's interesting. Because the woman I've been speaking with on the phone for the past 8 months, the woman who's been working undercover in various departments of my company to evaluate our culture and identify potential leaders, told me she was here tonight as hired help." Esther met David's eyes. In that moment, he saw everything. The calculated patience, the testing, the way she'd watched him all evening, waiting to see how far he'd go. "I don't understand," Marcus said slowly. "Esther Hartman? But you said your name was—" "Esther Wallace," she finished. "My mother's maiden name. I've been using it for the past year while conducting my evaluation." David's mind raced backward. That small apartment had been temporary, she'd said. Her nonprofit job was volunteer work, something to stay busy. Her parents weren't actually teachers. That had been a cover story. How had he never questioned it? How had he been so blind? "Because you never really looked at her," a voice whispered in his head. "You saw what you wanted to see." "This dinner was supposed to be my final assessment," Esther continued, her voice steady. "Father and I identified 3 candidates for the VP position. I wanted to see how they treated people they perceived as beneath them. How they behaved when they thought nobody important was watching." Richard Pemberton had gone pale. Jennifer Walsh looked like she might be sick. "I specifically asked each candidate to host a dinner party and invite the board," Hartman added. "I told them I might stop by. What I didn't mention was that my daughter would already be there, playing a role." "David." Esther's eyes hadn't left his face. "You introduced me as the help. Your wife of 3 years. You told your colleagues I was hired staff." "I can explain," David started, but she raised a hand. "You told Richard the champagne wasn't properly decanted last time. There was no last time. You invented a criticism to make yourself look sophisticated." Her voice remained calm, which somehow made it worse. "You told Jennifer about your yacht. We don't have a yacht. You've never been to the Hamptons. Your father wasn't in real estate. He was a mechanic. A good man who worked hard and loved his family. But tonight, you erased him because he wasn't impressive enough." Each word landed like a physical blow. Around them, the board members shifted uncomfortably. "The lies about your background I could forgive," Esther said. "Insecurity makes people do foolish things. But you looked me in the eye 3 hours ago and asked me to degrade myself, to pretend I was a servant in my own home, for a promotion, for money, for the approval of people you barely know." Hartman walked to the wall panel near the dining room entrance. He pressed something, and a screen descended from the ceiling. David's stomach dropped as footage began to play, security cameras he hadn't known existed, showing him grabbing Esther's wrist, whispering his request, watching her face crumble. "I had the house prepared," Esther said quietly. "Cameras in every room. I needed to be certain." The footage continued. David saw himself ignoring her, dismissing her, performing for his guests while his wife served them like a stranger. "Jesus Christ," Marcus muttered. Hartman stopped the video. "Mr. Jorge, you're terminated effective immediately." The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Terminated. David's mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. Around him, the board members had become statues, frozen in various poses of shock and discomfort. Someone's phone buzzed. Nobody reached for it. "Sir, I think we should discuss this privately," David finally managed. "There's nothing to discuss." Hartman's voice was ice. "You falsified your background during the hiring process. That alone is grounds for dismissal. But requesting your wife to pose as domestic staff." He shook his head. "That speaks to a character deficiency I won't tolerate in my leadership team." Jennifer Walsh cleared her throat. "James, perhaps we should consider." "Jennifer, did you know David was married?" Hartman asked. She blinked. "No. He never mentioned a wife." "Richard? Marcus? Any of you?" Heads shook around the room. David had been so careful, keeping his personal life separate, maintaining the illusion. Now that careful separation became evidence against him. "He's been hiding her for 2 years," Hartman continued. "Attending company events solo. Wearing his wedding ring, but claiming it was his father's. Building an elaborate fiction about his entire life." He turned back to David. "What else have you lied about? Financial reports? Client relationships?" "Nothing. I swear, my work has been completely honest." "Your work has been adequate," Hartman interrupted. "Not exceptional. Not VP material. The only reason you were being considered was because you interviewed well and several board members vouched for your supposed pedigree." He glanced at Marcus. "Connections matter in business, you told me. He understands our world because he comes from it." Marcus looked at his shoes. "Except he doesn't come from it," Hartman said. "He comes from a hard-working family in Ohio. His father owned an auto repair shop. His mother was a school secretary. They put themselves into debt to send him to State University. He graduated with honors, worked his way up from an entry-level position, and should be proud of every bit of that journey." David felt something crack inside his chest. Those were the facts. The truth he'd buried under layers of lies because it hadn't felt impressive enough. But instead of owning his story, Hartman continued, he invented a new one. And tonight, when the fiction threatened to collapse, he sacrificed his wife to maintain it. Esther still stood near her father, arms crossed. Her expression was unreadable. David wanted to look away, but couldn't. "The prenup," she said softly. "Do you remember the clause about character and fidelity?" David's blood turned to ice. The prenuptial agreement. He'd signed it without reading carefully, eager to get married, never imagining it mattered. Esther had no money, he'd thought. What was there to protect? Everything, apparently. Section 7, subsection 3. Esther recited from memory. In the event that either party engages in behavior demonstrating fundamental character deficiency, including, but not limited to, public humiliation of spouse, deliberate reputation damage, or actions that reasonable persons would consider cruel or degrading. The injured party retains full ownership of all marital assets. All marital assets, Hartman repeated, which includes the house you're standing in, the car in your garage, the investment accounts, the trust fund established in your name when you married my daughter. David's knees went weak. Trust fund. $2 million, Esther said. Accessible after 5 years of marriage. We have 2 years left. She paused. Had 2 years left. The room spun. $2 million. The money had been real, but he'd never known. All his lies, his performance, his desperate social climbing, and he'd been married to wealth the entire time. The prenup was my insurance policy, Esther continued. I've seen what money does to people, how it changes them. I needed to know that whoever I married wanted me, not my father's fortune. And I wanted to know she'd choose someone with genuine character, Hartman added. Someone who'd treat her well, regardless of circumstances. David's laugh came out broken. This was a test. The whole marriage was a test. No. Esther's voice sharpened. Our marriage was real. I loved you, David. The man who stayed up all night when I had the flu, who cried at our wedding, who told me about his parents with such pride. Her eyes glistened. That man was real. But somewhere along the way, you decided he wasn't good enough. The company changed me, David whispered. The pressure, the expectations. The company didn't do this. She gestured at the frozen room around them. You did. You looked at me tonight and calculated that your image was worth more than my dignity. Richard Pemberton stood abruptly. I think we should give you privacy. Stay, Hartman commanded. All of you. You're about to witness something important. He walked to the dining room table and picked up a leather folder David hadn't noticed before. Opening it, he removed several documents. These are the evaluation reports, Hartman said, from Esther's 8 months undercover. She worked in accounting, customer service, the mailroom, facilities management. She observed hundreds of employees at every level. He held up one document. Thomas Chin, junior analyst. Consistently helped new employees, shared credit, stayed late to mentor interns. Recommended for accelerated promotion track. He held up another. Patricia Okonkwo, senior project manager. Noticed when the night cleaning staff was being underpaid, filed a formal complaint. Used her own political capital to ensure fair wages. Recommended for VP consideration. Document after document. Stories of integrity, courage, kindness. People who'd passed tests they didn't know they were taking. And then there's you, David. Hartman set the papers down. Your report is quite comprehensive. The casual racism toward the Hispanic facilities manager. The way you blamed your assistant for your own mistakes. The time you took credit for your team's work in front of executives. He tapped the folder. Esther documented everything. I was trying to advance, David said desperately. To provide for us. You were trying to become someone you're not, Esther interrupted. And in the process, you forgot who you were. Hartman checked his watch. Security will arrive in approximately 3 minutes. I called them before I walked in. 3 minutes. David had 3 minutes before his entire life disintegrated in front of witnesses. Please, he heard himself say. Esther, please. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll change. You had 3 years to change. Her voice was steady, final. 3 years where I watched you transform into someone I didn't recognize. Tonight wasn't an isolated incident, David. It was the culmination. Marcus' chin shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps we should discuss the legal ramifications privately. No, Esther turned to face the board members. You all need to hear this. You need to understand what happens when you build a culture that rewards performance over character. When you make people feel like their backgrounds disqualify them unless they reinvent themselves. Jennifer Walsh's face had gone red. We never intended. Didn't you? Esther's gaze was penetrating. Jennifer, you told David earlier that he's exactly what Hartman Industries needs because he comes from that world. You endorsed him based on fictional yacht clubs and prep schools, not his actual work performance. Jennifer opened her mouth, closed it. Richard, you've promoted 3 people in the past year. Esther looked at Pemberton. All of them graduated from Ivy League schools. All from wealthy families. Meanwhile, Patricia Okonkwo, who has an MBA from a state university and has increased her department's efficiency by 47%, keeps getting passed over. Why is that? Richard's jaw tightened. Merit-based decisions are influenced by unconscious bias, Hartman finished, which is exactly why Esther's evaluation was necessary. We're about to restructure the entire company based on her findings. The room went silent again. David saw the implications dawn on each face. Promotions would be reconsidered. Hiring practices examined. The Old Boys Club was about to collapse. The VP position, Marcus said slowly. Who's getting it? Patricia Okonkwo, Esther answered. Along with a seat on the board. She's earned it 10 times over. David thought of Patricia. Quiet, competent, always professional. He'd barely noticed her. That was the problem, wasn't it? He'd been so focused on impressing the people he thought mattered that he'd ignored everyone else. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Security had arrived early. 2 men in uniform entered, their expressions neutral. Professional. They'd done this before, David realized. Escorted terminated employees from buildings, from events, from lives they'd built on unstable foundations. Mr. Jorge, the taller security officer, said, "We need you to come with us." Reality crashed down. This was actually happening. In front of his colleagues. In front of people whose respect he'd spent years cultivating. The humiliation was so complete, so absolute, that David almost laughed. "Can I at least get my coat?" he asked. "It will be shipped to you," Hartman said, "along with the contents of your office. You're banned from company property, effective immediately." Banned. The word felt medieval. David looked at Esther one last time. She stood beside her father, elegant in her simple dress, pearl earrings catching the chandelier light. She looked like exactly what she was, someone who'd never needed to pretend, who'd been testing him while he tested himself against an imaginary standard. "I really did love you," he said quietly. Something flickered in her expression. Pain, maybe, or pity. "I know," she replied. "But you loved the idea of success more. And when you had to choose between us, you chose the lie." The security officers moved closer. One touched David's elbow gently, professionally. It was time. "Wait." Esther reached into her purse and removed a small velvet box. She opened it, revealing her wedding ring, the one he'd saved 3 months to buy, working overtime, eating ramen, because he wanted to give her something beautiful. She set the box on the table. The diamond caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. "You should have this back," she said. "It was given in good faith. Before everything changed." "Keep it," David said, his voice breaking. "Please. It's the one real thing I ever gave you." Esther's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. "That's exactly why I can't." The security officers began walking David toward the door. Board members parted like water, avoiding his gaze. At the threshold, he turned back one last time. The dinner party continued in frozen tableau. Hartman stood with his arm around his daughter. Jennifer, Marcus, and Richard looked shell-shocked. The other board members whispered among themselves. And on the table, champagne still sparkled in crystal glasses, expensive food growing cold on fine china. The stage set for a performance that had ended in spectacular failure. "For what it's worth," David said to the room, "I'm sorry. Not just for tonight. For all of it. For being the kind of person who made this necessary." Nobody responded. The silence followed him out the door, down the steps, across the lawn, to the security vehicle waiting at the curb. Neighbors' curtains twitched. Someone was probably filming. By morning, the story would spread. The executive who pretended his wife was the maid, who lost everything in one catastrophic evening. The security car pulled away. Through the rear window, David watched his house, Esther's house, recede. Lights blazed in every window. The dinner party would continue without him. Decisions about the company's future would be made. His name would become a cautionary tale, a story told to new hires about what not to do. He'd wanted so desperately to be someone important, someone who mattered. Instead, he'd become a lesson. The car turned the corner. The house disappeared from view. David closed his eyes and finally let himself feel the full weight of what he'd destroyed. Not just his career or his marriage, but the person he could have been, the honest, hard-working man his parents had raised him to be. That man was gone, and David had no one to blame but himself. Back at the house, the board members began gathering their things. Well, Richard Pemberton said to no one in particular, that was educational. Hartman fixed him with a stare. Educational. Is that what we're calling it? Richard had the grace to look uncomfortable. You meant you just witnessed a man destroy his life, and you're treating it like a seminar. Hartman's voice was quiet, dangerous. Let me be clear about something. David Jorge's behavior tonight was reprehensible, but every single person in this room enabled it. Marcus bristled. That's not fair, isn't it? Esther moved to the center of the room. David lied about his background because he believed correctly that you'd value him more if he came from wealth. He performed for you because authenticity wasn't rewarded in your culture. We never asked him to lie, Jennifer protested. No, you just made it clear that people like Patricia don't get promoted, Esther countered. That state schools aren't as good as Ivy League. That working-class backgrounds are something to overcome rather than celebrate. She gestured around the opulent room. You created an environment where a good man felt he had to become someone else to succeed. The silence that followed was suffocating. I don't excuse what he did to me tonight, Esther continued. That was his choice, and he'll live with those consequences. But his desperation, his conviction that he wasn't good enough as himself, that's on all of you. Hartman picked up the leather folder again. Starting Monday, we're implementing comprehensive changes. Blind resume reviews, standardized interview processes, mentorship programs for employees from non-traditional backgrounds. He looked at each board member in turn. And anyone who resists these changes will find themselves looking for new opportunities elsewhere. Nobody argued. Now get out, Hartman said. All of you. This dinner is over. They filed out quickly, quietly. Cars started in the driveway. Taillights disappeared into the night. Within minutes, the house was empty except for Esther and her father. Esther sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. The performance was over. The test was complete, but victory tasted like ash. You're crying, Hartman observed gently. She touched her face, surprised to find tears. I loved him, Dad. The real him. Before all this. I know, sweetheart. Hartman sat beside her, taking her hand. That's what makes this so hard. Was I wrong to do this? To set up the test? Hartman considered the question carefully. You needed to know who you married. Better to find out now than 10 years from now with children involved. But maybe if I'd just told him the truth from the beginning, he would have performed differently, Hartman finished. You would never have known his real character. Esther, you gave him every opportunity to be himself. He chose the mask instead. She picked up the velvet box containing her wedding ring. The diamond was modest by her family standards, but David had been so proud when he proposed. She remembered his nervous smile, the way his hands shook slightly as he opened the box on that beach at sunset. He was good once, she whispered. Maybe he still is, underneath. Hartman squeezed her hand. Maybe losing everything will help him find that person again. Or maybe it will destroy him. That's not your responsibility anymore. Esther closed the ring box with a soft click. Her father was right, but it didn't stop the ache in her chest. She'd gone into this marriage with genuine love, genuine hope. The deception about her background had been necessary. She'd seen too many relationships corrupted by wealth, but she truly believed David was different. For a while he had been. What happens to him now? She asked. He'll land somewhere, Hartman said. Probably take a job outside the industry. Start over. Whether he learns from this or just becomes more bitter, that's up to him. Esther stood and walked to the window. Outside her neighborhood, her real neighborhood, the one David had never seen, stretched into the darkness. Modest homes, quiet streets. The life she'd maintained separately from the fiction they'd built together. I'm moving back to the apartment, she announced. Esther. The real one. The small one where I was living when we met. She turned to face her father. I need to remember who I am. Not the heiress playing dress-up. Not the CEO's daughter. Just me. Hartman smiled sadly. You're stronger than I was at your age. I learned from the best. They stood together in the quiet house, surrounded by the debris of the evening. Half-empty glasses, uneaten food, the careful staging of a dinner party that had become something else entirely. The company changes start Monday, Esther said. But I want to do something else too. A foundation for employees from working-class backgrounds. Scholarships, mentorship, support systems. So nobody else feels like they have to lie about who they are. In David's name? Hartman asked. Esther considered it. No. In his father's name. Antonio Jorge. The mechanic who raised a son to work hard and dream big, before those dreams got twisted into something ugly. That's generous. It's necessary. She set the ring box on the mantel. David's mistake wasn't his background. It was his shame about it. If we can help prevent that shame, maybe we prevent the next tragedy. Hartman pulled his daughter into a hug. You're going to be a better CEO than I ever was. I learned from the best, she repeated, her voice muffled against his shoulder. They stayed like that for a long moment. Outside, the night continued. Somewhere across town, David Jorge was probably sitting in a hotel room, contemplating the ruins of his life. Tomorrow, news of his termination would spread. People would gossip, speculate, judge. But tonight, in this quiet house, Esther allowed herself to grieve. Not for the marriage she'd lost, that had died long before tonight, but for the man she'd believed she married. The one who'd existed briefly, before ambition and insecurity had consumed him. Maybe he'd find his way back to that person. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, Esther had her own path to walk now. Harder, lonelier, but authentically hers. She removed the pearl earrings and set them beside the ring box, symbols of a performance that had finally, mercifully ended.